One sentence at her family dinner destroyed my 18-year marriage and changed everything I thought I knew about my life. My wife had been living a double life for years, but the truth she was hiding was far worse than just another affair. When I started digging into our family's finances and DNA, I discovered a web of lies that went deeper than I ever imagined. And I became someone she never expected me to be. My name is Arthur Sterling. I'm 43 years old. And up until 6 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. Regional sales manager for a Fortune 500 company, pulling down 6 figures a year, living in a 4-bedroom colonial in Surrey with my wife of 18 years and our 2 kids. The American dream, right? White picket fence, golden retriever named Buddy, even a basketball hoop in the driveway where Leo and I used to shoot hoops every Sunday after church. Used to, past tense, because everything changed on a Tuesday night in March when my wife said one sentence at dinner with her family that made me walk out and never return to the life I thought I knew. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't announce itself with fireworks and warning bells. It slips in quiet, wearing the face of someone you trust. For me, that face belonged to 3 people. My wife Alara, my best friend Felix Vance, and 2 other men I'd later discover had been playing house with my family while I was busy being the provider, the protector, the fool. Alara always said I was too trusting. Arthur, she'd tell me, you see the best in everyone, even when they don't deserve it. I thought she meant it as a compliment. Turns out she was giving me a road map to my own destruction. The first real crack in my perfect world came 3 weeks before that dinner. I was reviewing our family's financial statements, something I did quarterly like clockwork. Numbers don't lie, and they tell stories if you know how to read them. What I found didn't make sense. Payments to accounts I'd never opened, transfers to investment funds I'd never authorized, and credit cards in my name that I'd never seen. When I asked Alara about it, she laughed it off. Oh, honey, she said, not even looking up from her laptop. Those are just the college funds I set up for the kids. You signed the paperwork months ago, remember? I didn't remember, but then again, I signed a lot of papers. Business was good, money was flowing, and I trusted my wife to handle the family finances while I focused on bringing home the bacon. That should have been red flag number 1. But like I said, I was too trusting, too busy, too comfortable in my own skin to see the knife coming from my back. The Morrow family dinner happened every 3rd Tuesday of a month. Alara's parents, Bernard and Helena, lived in a sprawling Tudor house in Ascot that screamed old money and older grudges. Her brother Julian always showed up with his latest girlfriend, and somehow the conversation always turned to how successful everyone was. Except Arthur, Bernard said, cutting his prime rib with surgical precision. How's that sales job treating you? Still pushing widgets for corporate America? I forced a smile. Actually, we landed the Beaumont account last quarter. Biggest deal in company history. Beaumont, Helena repeated like she was tasting something sour. Weren't they the ones with all those layoffs last year? Before I could respond, Julian jumped in. Speaking of layoffs, did you hear about the Peterson Group? They're cutting their entire sales division, going all digital now. The conversation continued like this for 20 minutes. Every achievement I mentioned got dissected, minimized, or redirected to someone else's success story. Leo sat quietly picking at his food. While Isabel scrolled through her phone under the table, Alara just smiled and nodded, never once defending me or changing the subject. Then came dessert. Helena raised her wine glass, slightly unsteady from her 3rd pour. To family, she announced. To the people who stick by us through thick and thin. Everyone raised their glasses, even me, though I was beginning to feel like the odd man out of my own wife's family dinner. You know, Alara said, swirling the wine in her glass. I was talking to my friend Amelie yesterday. She's getting remarried again. Julian asked with a laugh. What's this, husband number 3? Second, Alara corrected, but she said something interesting. She said the first time around she married for security. This time she's marrying for passion. The table went quiet. Helena set down her glass. Bernard stopped chewing. What's your point, sweetheart? I asked, though something in my gut already knew. Alara looked directly at me, her green eyes cold as winter glass. Well, if I had to do it all over again, she said, I'd probably marry someone with a bit more backbone. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not just the insult, but the casual way she delivered it, like commenting on the weather, like it was a thought she'd had many times before. Nobody gasped. Nobody told her that was inappropriate. Julian actually chuckled. Helena nodded slightly, as if agreeing. Bernard continued eating his apple pie. That's when it hit me. This wasn't the first time she'd said something like this. This was just the first time she'd said it in front of me. I set down my fork, stood up slowly, looked around the table at these people who were supposed to be my family. "Excuse me," I said quietly, and I walked out just like that. No dramatic speech, no thrown napkins, no slammed doors. I simply left the house, got in my car, and drove away. I had no idea that one sentence at dinner with her family had just ended my marriage. I drove around for 2 hours after leaving that dinner. Not going anywhere in particular, just driving. When I finally pulled into our driveway, the house was dark except for the porch light Alara always left on. Her car wasn't there yet. Inside, I went straight to my home office and did something I'd never done before. I opened Alara's laptop. She'd left it on the kitchen counter, probably in a rush to get to her parents' house. The screen was still unlocked, showing her email. I wasn't snooping. At least that's what I told myself. I was just trying to understand how the woman I'd loved for 18 years could humiliate me so casually in front of her family. The first email that caught my attention was from someone named Thierry Dubois. The subject line read, "Next week's arrangements." I opened it. "Alara, the hotel suite is booked for Wednesday afternoon. Same place as usual. Leo's tuition payment went through. He'll never have to worry about college costs. See you soon, T." My hand started shaking. Leo's tuition. He was only 16. And what hotel suite? I scrolled down a previous emails from Thierry. There were dozens going back 3 years. Business meetings, dinner plans, and references to our boy that made my stomach twist into knots. Then I found the photos Thierry had sent. Leo at a baseball game I'd never been to. Leo at what looked like a father-son golf tournament. Leo receiving an award at school, while Thierry stood proudly in the background. I grabbed my phone and called Leo directly. "Hey, Dad." Leo answered on the second ring. "What's up, son? Where are you right now?" "At Tyler's house working on our history project." "What? Who drove you to the state science fair last month?" There was a pause. "You were in Chicago on business, remember?" "Mom's friend Thierry took me." "Thierry Dubois." Another pause. "Yeah. How do you know his name?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "We'll talk when you get home, son." After hanging up, I dove deeper into Alara's digital life. What I found destroyed everything I thought I knew about my family. A second email account, a secret Instagram profile, and bank statements showing regular deposits from T. Dubois investments totaling over $40,000 in the past year alone. But it was the DNA test results that stopped my heart completely. Hidden in a folder labeled Personal Documents was a paternity test for Leo. Thierry Dubois, 99.7% probability of paternal relationship. Leo wasn't my son, and Thierry Dubois wasn't just Alara's business contact. He was Leo's real father, and he'd been paying for his upbringing while I played the fool. I was still staring at the DNA results when I heard Alara's car pull into the driveway. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to demand answers and explanations. But a bigger part of me, the part that had learned to be strategic in business negotiations, told me to gather more information first. I quickly closed her laptop and went upstairs, pretending to be asleep when she came to bed. "Arthur," she whispered, "are you awake?" I kept my breathing steady and didn't respond. "I'm sorry about tonight," she continued, thinking I was unconscious. "You didn't deserve that. But sometimes I wish you'd fight back. You know, stand up for yourself." If only she knew what I was planning. The next morning, while Alara was in the shower, I went through her purse. Credit cards I'd never seen, a second cell phone hidden in a side compartment, and a keychain with an unfamiliar key. The phone was locked, but I knew Alara's patterns. She used the same 4-digit code for everything. Isabel's birthday, 0313. It worked. The text messages told a different story than the emails. This phone was for someone else entirely, someone named Gail Rafferty. "Can't wait to see our little girl tonight. Read a message from 3 days ago." Isabel's dance recital is at 7. You'll be so proud. Our little girl, Isabel. I scrolled through months of messages between Alara and Gail. Plans for Isabel's soccer games, discussions about her grades, and photos of Isabel that I'd never seen. Pictures taken at restaurants and events where Gail was clearly the one behind the camera. Then I found a banking app on the phone, an account in Alara's maiden name, receiving monthly deposits from the Rafferty Consulting. Isabel's college fund wasn't being funded by me. It was being funded by her biological father. I set the phone down and walked to Isabel's room. She was still sleeping. Her dark hair spread across the pillow in the morning light. I could see features I'd never noticed before. The shape of her ears, the curve of her nose, the way her eyebrows arched. None of it came from me. Daddy. Isabel stirred, opening her eyes. What's wrong? You look sad. I forced a smile and sat on the edge of her bed. Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. I just wanted to see my beautiful daughter before school. Except she wasn't my daughter. And after 18 years of believing I was building a family, I discovered I was just the man paying the bills while other men raised their children in my house. The question now wasn't whether to leave. The question was how to do it without destroying 2 kids who didn't ask for any of this. The next discovery came by accident. I was reviewing our homeowner's insurance policy, something I did annually to ensure we had adequate coverage, when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The deed to our house, the one I'd been paying the mortgage on for 12 years, wasn't in my name or even both our names. It was titled as Alara Sterling and Thierry Dubois, listed as joint tenants with right of survivorship. I called our real estate attorney immediately. Mr. Sterling, attorney Mr. Etienne said after reviewing the documents I'd sent over. This is highly unusual. According to these records, you've been making mortgage payments on a property you don't legally own. How is that possible? I signed all the paperwork when we bought the house. It appears the deed was transferred shortly after purchase. Your wife and Mr. Dubois would have needed to execute this jointly. You would have had to sign a quitclaim deed relinquishing your ownership rights. I'd never signed such a document, which meant either my signature was forged or I'd been deceived about what I was signing. There's more, Mr. Etienne continued. The property has a substantial equity line of credit against it. Nearly $200,000 has been borrowed and spent over the past 3 years. $200,000 I knew nothing about. That evening, I confronted Alara directly. She was in our bedroom, or rather what I'd thought was our bedroom, getting ready for another late business meeting. Alara, I said, holding the property documents. We need to talk. She glanced at the papers, and her face went pale. Arthur, I can explain. Explain how you transferred ownership of our house to Thierry Dubois without my knowledge. Explain how you've borrowed $200,000 against property I don't even legally own. Alara sat down on the bed, her hands shaking slightly. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Thierry needed a safe investment somewhere to protect his assets during his divorce. It was temporary. His divorce was finalized 2 years ago. And what about the equity line of credit? Leo needed private tutoring. Isabel's dance lessons are expensive. The money went to the kids. The kids that aren't mine? I asked quietly. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, Alara looked up at me with tears in her eyes. Arthur, you're a good man. You've been an amazing father to them, regardless of biology. That has to count for something. What counts is 18 years of lies, I replied. What counts is that I've been supporting children while their biological fathers live their real lives with their real families. What counts is that I don't even own the roof over my head. Alara stood up, her tears replaced by something harder. So what are you going to do? Destroy 2 kids because you can't handle the truth. I'm not the one who destroyed anything, I said. You did that years ago. I'm just finally seeing the wreckage. The next morning, I did something I'd never done in 18 years of marriage. I called in sick to work and drove to Thierry Dubois's office. If I was going to understand the full scope of this betrayal, I needed to hear it from the source. Dubois Investments occupied the top floor of a glass building downtown. Thierry himself was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, confident, expensive suit, and a handshake that felt like a business transaction. Arthur Sterling, he said, as if he'd been expecting me. I wondered when you'd figure it out. So, you know why I'm here. Thierry gestured to a chair across from his massive oak desk. Alara called this morning. She's quite upset. I bet she is. What I want to know is how long you've known Leo was your son. Since before he was born. Thierry replied without hesitation. Alara told me she was pregnant, but she was already married to you. We agreed it would be better for everyone if you raised him. Better for everyone or better for you. Thierry leaned back in his chair. Look, Arthur, I'm not going to pretend this situation is ideal, but I've been financially responsible for Leo his entire life. His college fund, his medical expenses, that baseball camp he attended last summer. All of it came from me. While I played house with your son. While you gave him stability and a family structure I couldn't provide at the time. Thierry corrected. I was building my business. I traveled constantly. I wasn't ready to be a full-time father. But you are now. Thierry's expression hardened. Leo's going to college next year. He's smart enough to figure out the truth eventually. When that happens, I want to be part of his life. Openly. And the house. Taking ownership of my home. That was Alara's idea. She was worried about your debt levels. Thought the property would be safer in different hands. I went along with it to protect Leo's inheritance. I stood up slowly, feeling something settle in a place inside my chest. Not anger, something colder and more purposeful. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to transfer full ownership of that house back to me within 30 days. You're going to pay back every penny of that equity line of credit, and then you're going to stay away from my family until Leo turns 18. Thierry laughed. Or what? Or I'll expose this entire arrangement to your business partners, your clients, and anyone else who might find it. Interesting that you've been financing a secret family while married to someone else. The laughter died on Thierry's lips. You can't prove anything. I pulled out my phone and showed him photos of the documents I discovered, bank records, property transfers, DNA test results. I'm in sales, Thierry. I know how to build a case. And right now, I've got enough evidence to destroy your reputation and your business. Thierry was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. 30 days, he agreed. 20, I corrected, because I'm done being the reasonable one in this situation. 3 days after my confrontation with Thierry, Leo came home from school looking troubled. He found me in the garage where I'd been organizing tools and thinking about my next moves. Dad, Leo said, we need to talk. I set down the wrench I'd been holding. What's on your mind, son? Mom told me everything about Thierry being my biological father, about Isabel and Gail. Leo's voice was steady, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. She said you're planning to leave us. This was the conversation I'd been dreading. Leo, what I'm planning to leave is a marriage built on lies. That doesn't mean I'm leaving you. But Thierry wants me to come live with him after I graduate, Leo continued. He's got this whole plan for my future, college, internships at his company, everything mapped out. And what do you want? Leo was quiet for a long moment. I want to understand why everyone lied to me for 16 years. And I want to know if you still consider me your son, even though we're not related by blood. The question hit me harder than Thierry's revelations or Alara's betrayal. This kid, this young man I'd coached through Little League, taught to drive, helped with homework for 16 years, was asking if biology trumped love. Leo, I said, you will always be my son. DNA doesn't change the fact that I was there for your first steps, your first day of school, every birthday, every scraped knee, every accomplishment. Thierry may have contributed genetic material, but I've been your father. Leo nodded, but I could see he was torn. He's offered me things you can't, Dad. Full tuition to any college, connections in the business world, opportunities. I know. And if those opportunities are what you want, I won't stand in your way. But remember this. Real fathers don't buy their children's loyalty. They earn it through years of showing up. The next day, Isabel confronted me with a different approach. She was angry, defensive, and completely loyal to her mother. Gail says you're trying to destroy our family, Isabel announced, standing in the kitchen with her arms crossed. He says you're jealous because Mom found someone who really understands her. Isabel, sweetheart, I'm not destroying anything. I'm just refusing to continue living a lie. What lie? That we're a family? That you love us. The lie that your mother has been faithful to our marriage. The lie that I'm your biological father when both you and Leo have real fathers who've been part of your lives all along. Isabel's face flushed red. Gale is my real father. He's the one who comes to my dance recitals. He's the one who helps me with my art projects. You're just the guy who pays the bills. Her words stung, but they also clarified something important. Isabel had already made her choice, and it wasn't me. If that's how you feel, I said quietly, then maybe it's time for you to live with your real father full time. Maybe it is, Isabel shot back. At least he doesn't make Mom cry herself to sleep every night. After Isabel stormed out, I sat alone in the kitchen I'd thought was mine, in a house I'd learned wasn't mine, surrounded by the remnants of a family that had never really belonged to me. But for the first time in weeks, I felt something like relief. The truth was finally out in the open, and the battle lines were clearly drawn. The call came at 11 p.m. on a Thursday night. Felix Vance, my supposed best friend for over 20 years, was drunk and apparently feeling guilty. Arthur, Felix slurred into the phone. I need to tell you something about Alara. About everything. I already know about Thierry and Gale, I said. If you're calling to confess, you're about 18 years too late. No, man. You don't know everything. There's more. So much more. I felt my stomach drop. What are you talking about? Meet me at the Old Anchor pub downtown. There are things you need to know before you make any decisions about the divorce. An hour later, I found Felix in a corner booth, 3 empty beer bottles in front of him. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past month. Talk, I said, sliding into the booth across from him. It started in college, Felix began. Alara and we hooked up a few times before you two got serious. But it never stopped, Arthur. Every few months, whenever she got bored or you were traveling for work, the room seemed to tilt sideways. You and Alara? For 20 years, Felix, you've been sleeping with my wife for 20 years. Felix nodded miserably. But here's the thing you really need to know. Thierry and Gale, they're not the only ones. There's been a whole rotation of guys over the years. Business contacts, neighbors, even one of Leo's little league coaches. I felt something break loose inside my chest, not my heart. That was already damaged beyond repair. Something deeper. The last thread connecting me to the man I used to be. How many others know about this? I asked. Most of our old crowd from college. Your coworkers at Sterling Moore Holdings. Hell, even some of the parents from the kids' schools. Felix looked up at me with bloodshot eyes. Arthur, you've been the subject of gossip for years. Everyone felt sorry for you, but nobody wanted to be the one to tell you. I stood up slowly, feeling strangely calm. Felix, I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. He looked up at me expectantly. If I ever see you again, if you ever contact me or anyone in my family, if you ever mention my name to another human being, I will destroy you. Not physically. I'm not going to lower myself to your level, but I will systematically dismantle your life piece by piece until you understand what it feels like to be betrayed by everyone you trusted. Felix's face went pale. Arthur, I was trying to help. You were trying to ease your own guilt. There's a difference. I threw 20 pounds on the table. Stay away from me, Felix. We're done. Walking out of that bar, I realized that the man who had walked in, the man who still held on to a hope that some relationships in his life were genuine, was gone forever. What remained was someone harder, smarter, and completely done with being anyone's fool. The old Arthur Sterling had died in that booth. What emerged was someone who was finally ready to play by different rules. 6 months later, I was sitting in my attorney's office watching Alara sign divorce papers that would reshape everyone's expectations about how this story would end. I don't understand, Alara said, looking at the settlement documents. You're not taking anything? No alimony demand, no property division, no custody fight. My attorney, Camille Leclerc, slid another document across the table. My client has some specific conditions. The terms were simple but devastating. Alara could keep the house that was already in Thierry's name. She could keep custody of Isabel, who had made her preferences clear. But in exchange, she would surrender all parental rights to Leo despite him not being my biological son. Thierry Dubois and Gale Rafferty will assume full financial responsibility for their respective children, I announced. College tuition, health insurance, everything. I'm done subsidizing other men's offspring. And what about Leo? Alara asked. He's chosen to stay with you. Leo will be legally adopted by me as my son. His biological father forfeits all parental rights in exchange for being released from all financial obligations. Thierry Dubois shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He'd been expecting to gain a son, not lose one, along with the responsibility of paying for his upbringing. This is vindictive, Alara protested. You're splitting up our family out of spite. I'm not splitting up anything, I replied calmly. I'm just acknowledging the family structure that already existed. Isabel wants to live with her biological father. Leo wants to stay with the man who raised him. Thierry can visit Leo on holidays with my permission. The real shock came when I handed over the final document, a complete forensic accounting of our marital finances prepared by a team of investigators I'd hired. Alara owes my client £347,000 in stolen marital assets, Camille announced. Money that was transferred to accounts controlled by Thierry Dubois and Gail Rafferty without Mr. Sterling's knowledge or consent. I don't have that kind of money, Alara whispered. No, I agreed. But your boyfriends do. Thierry has already agreed to pay his portion to avoid criminal fraud charges. Gail will pay his share or face a civil lawsuit that will destroy his consulting business. Thierry looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. Arthur, we had an agreement. We had an agreement about the house. This is about stolen money. Two different issues. The meeting ended with Alara in tears, Thierry writing checks he hadn't expected to write, and me walking away from an 18-year marriage with more money than I'd started with. And the one thing that mattered most, a son who chose me over genetics and opportunity. 3 weeks later, Leo and I moved into a new house across town, smaller than the old place, but it was actually ours. Clean slate, clean title, clean conscience. Dad, Leo said on our first night in the new place. Do you ever regret taking me on? I mean, knowing what you know now. I looked at this young man who'd inherited another man's DNA, but somehow developed my values, my work ethic, my sense of integrity. Leo, I said, you're the best thing that came out of my marriage. Biology is just chemistry. Family is choice, and I choose you. Standing in the graduation ceremony crowd, watching Leo receive his high school diploma, I reflected on how much our lives had changed since that dinner with the Moreaus. Leo had grown into a remarkable young man. He'd earned a full academic scholarship to engineering school, not through Thierry's connections, but through his own hard work and intelligence. Thierry attended the graduation, sitting 3 rows behind us, acknowledging Leo with a nod, but respecting the boundaries we'd established. Isabel was there, too, with Gail and Alara. She'd grown distant over the years, but she seemed happy enough. Her choice to live with her biological father had worked out well for her. Gail had provided the artistic environment she'd craved, and she was headed to art school in the fall. Dad, Leo said after the ceremony, I have something to tell you. We were standing outside the gymnasium, diploma in hand, future stretching out ahead of us. Thierry approached me last week. He wants to pay for graduate school. Help me get into his company's management training program. I felt a familiar knot form in my stomach. And what did you tell him? I told him I appreciated the offer, but I'd rather earn my opportunities the way you taught me. Through merit, not connections. Leo smiled, and for a moment, he looked exactly like the 6-year-old boy I taught to ride a bicycle. Besides, he continued, I'm already following in my real father's footsteps. I got accepted into the business school program at State. I want to learn sales and management. Maybe we can work together someday. The pride I felt was overwhelming. This young man had turned down easy money and family connections to forge his own path. Everything I tried to teach him about integrity and self-reliance had taken root. As we walked to our car, Leo asked, do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd never found out? If you just kept living a lie? I thought about it for a moment. Honestly, I think I would have died a slow death inside. Living a lie corrodes your soul, even when you don't know you're living it. Any regrets about how you handled everything? Just one, I said. I regret not trusting my instincts sooner. The signs were there for years. I chose to ignore them because I thought being a good husband meant giving everyone the benefit of the doubt. Leo nodded thoughtfully. So what's the lesson here? The lesson is that sometimes walking away from what looks like family is the only way to find out who your real family actually is. 3 years ago, one sentence at dinner with her family had made me walk out and never return to the life I thought I knew. But that sentence had also led me to discover that the most important relationship in that life, my relationship with Leo, was strong enough to survive the truth. And that made everything else worth losing.